Hi, my name is Sophie Schleicher, and this is likely about to be a podcast called So Many Beans. I have been wanting to talk about the opera The Ballad of Baby Doe for quite some time now. My poor roommates have heard every single thing that there is to hear about this opera over the course of the last 2 weeks. And my friends and family have heard a lot more over the past decade or so, and it seemed time. This last December, I posted a sort of intro episode to what I thought was going to be a nice podcast. I had planned on putting the first episode up in January, and then things happened. I'm finding I have a bit more motivation right now to sort of get things going, partly because Central City Opera is currently putting on The Ballad of Baby Doe. For those that don't know, Central City Opera originated Baby Doe. They sort of did the original commissioning of the opera, though that gets a little complicated. We'll talk about that in another episode. They put it on every 10 years, and this is the year. They put the schedule up last year sometime, and I thought, it'd be funny if I got tickets to all 9 performances. At some point that stopped being a joke, and I now have tickets to all 9 performances. So, oops. My Baby Doe mug. I'm having very thematic tea right now. So I am going to all of the performances of The Ballad of Baby Doe. We have just completed number 3. Tomorrow is actually number 4. That's really exciting. It's been great fun. So I'm sort of in the thick of it again. I have pulled out all of my various books, and I've been sort of reading things and thinking about the opera a lot. When I'm not at the opera, I'm thinking about the opera, and when I'm not thinking about the opera, I'm talking about the opera. When I'm not thinking or talking, it's just playing in my head all the time now, so it seemed as good a time as any. So I thought I'd kind of dive in. The original conception for this was to go through kind of scene by scene and just talk through what's going on in the opera and throw in a bit of context and that sort of thing. You're gonna get whatever comes out of my mouth, which will probably be informative, possibly accurate, which would be even better. Ballad of Baby Doe. We open with the overture, of course, and the overture, I love the overture is one of my favorite parts of the entire thing, honestly. It really does a nice job of kind of setting the stage, puts you into the time and place of the opera, lets you know what you're in for. Actually, that's a lie. It does not tell you. You're not prepared for this opera by the overture. And I say that because I took a friend yesterday who had never seen it, and as we were driving into town, I told her, it is a tragedy, just beware. And she goes, oh yeah, it's okay. I probably won't get invested enough that I'll cry. And I said, well, I will be crying most of the time, actually, so I will cry for both of us. And she ended up crying because it's called a too-hanky opera for very good reason. But the overture really is, it's very folky and sweet. The music for the opera in general, Douglas Moore has really gone for a very Americana feel. He very intentionally didn't quote existing folk music, with one exception. We do get a little tiny quote of My Darling Clementine in there, and it's written to the libretto.
And I think that also serves to kind of bring the audience into time and place. Clementine was written about the California Gold Rush, which happened a decade before the Colorado one. 1849 versus 1859, 50, 48, 58. And also, My Darling Clementine wasn't written until 1885, and the beginning of this opera takes place in 1880, but it's a fun little detail anyway.
So the overture kind of sets us up, gets us in there, and then the opera itself opens quite literally with a bang. We get a gunshot. Central City has signs up everywhere that say there's a simulated gunshot in Act 1. We don't keep live ammo on site, and because it's the United States of America, you really do have to warn people about that and reassure them, which, This is America. But anyway, we get this gunshot, we get a bang, and an old silver miner stumbles onto the stage, usually out of some saloon doors. He's always got a big beard and grungy clothes and all of the things. And he says, "What's the matter, Fogarty? Ain't my money good enough?" And so Fogarty presumably is the bouncer. The libretto is kind of funny because it just says bouncer. He's not actually named in the libretto as like a named character. In the cast of characters, we also get a saloon bartender. I think all 3 of these are the same person. So it's kind of funny. I have a whole Blue Sky thread about the various discrepancies between the cast list, the named people in the libretto, and the folks who are actually named in the text. Because there's just some silly little things, some little discrepancies. And this libretto, I don't know, there's a couple, mistakes in this libretto as well. So it could be that that's part of what's going on. Because there's a bit in Bang Up Job, for example, where one of the cronies, instead of saying a lop-eared whatever they say, it says leopard in here, which is very funny to me. But anyway, So Fogarty, the bouncer, the saloon keeper, has thrown this man out. He's done. He's over drunk old miners shenanigans here. He says, don't you fire that cannon off. There's a concert on next door in the brand new opera house. Decent folk don't want no noise. This old silver miner he is over the moon, right? Because what's going on is he has found out today that Horace Tabor, this wealthy man, wants to buy his mine. He's got this silver mine, he calls it the Matchless Mine, and Horace wants to buy it from him, and he's gonna get rich because the richest man in town wants to buy his mine, right? And so you can't tell me anything. That opera house belongs to Tabor. I'm Tabor's little lamb, right? Like, you can't tell me what to do. Tabor's on my side. It's a silly little thing to kind of introduce the opera. One of the interesting things about this, to me, John Moriarty actually talked about this in, I have it here. Dwayne Smith's book about this opera, The Ballad of Baby Doe, talks about how the Matchless Mine is the fourth lead character in this opera. Of course, you have Horace Tabor, Augusta Tabor, Baby Doe Tabor, and then the Matchless Mine. And the Matchless Mine opens the opera. You hear about the Matchless Mine. The Matchless is introduced before Tabor is introduced, and the mine also closes the opera. And I just thought that was a really beautiful way to conceive of this. There are things to be said about the Matchless Mine theme. Mainly that, we'll just get this out early, Horace Tabor never said hold on to the Matchless Mine. That did not happen. Carolyn Bancroft, who we will definitely be talking about more. I might do a whole separate episode on Carolyn Bancroft, honestly. She's a wild one. She made up the Matchless Mine thing, and she confessed to making it up to sell her books, basically. That's oversimplifying it slightly. Her goal in writing, so she was a historian. I say that with a little bit of salt. A little tiny grain of salt sprinkled over the word historian. No, she's a historian. She's a journalist, and she writes a series of these really fantastic pamphlets about figures in Colorado history. She's particularly into the Tabors, to the point that she tried to copyright Baby Doe Tabor, claimed different points that she had copyrights on a bunch of different Tabor-related things, including images. She was an interesting one. Silver Queen about Baby Doe is probably the best known one. They were public history, they were pop history. They got people reading history, and they were written in kind of a narrative way, and the facts were generally not too bad, but she admitted to making up some things to kind of make it a more compelling narrative, perhaps. And one of those things was the idea that when he died on his deathbed, Horace Tabor said to Baby Doe, always hold on to the Matchless Mine. Don't ever get rid of the Matchless Mine. And it is a really romantic idea, right? Because, spoilers, she dies at the Matchless Mine. She moves up to a cabin in Leadville outside the mine, lives there for 35 years after Horace Tabor's death. Spoilers. The Matchless is still a pretty big figure in the Tabor story, even without Carolyn's meddling. Bless her. I have such mixed views on Carolyn Bancroft. I think she's absolutely splendid and also a complete nightmare. But no, the Matchless Mine does show up quite a bit within the Tabor story, historically as well. When his fortunes start to wane a little bit and he's making some business decisions that don't necessarily pan out, the Matchless is one of the mines that continues to produce for him and kind of keep him afloat for a while. So it is an important mine in the story. And of course, then Lizzie Tabor ends up there as well. It's not really even known who owned the Matchless at the time Horace died. He probably didn't. It had been mortgaged a few times and sold and passed around, and so he almost certainly did not own the mine at the time that Lizzie died. So holding on to it doesn't make sense. But she moved up there and ended up living in the cabin. The Matchless being the fourth character of the opera is very fitting in that way. So Tabor wants to buy this mine. We get a bunch of shenanigans with the old miner kind of running around, causing trouble. We get these saloon girls kind of making fun of him. Meanwhile, we've got Fogarty, the bouncer, kind of trying to keep tabs on everything. One of the fun things in the libretto here is John Latouche was very careful about the meter. So everything in this beginning bit here is in 7-beat phrases. What's the matter, Fogarty? I can count. Ain't my money good enough? That carries through the entire way through this opening scene. So he's very careful, very thoughtful about that. There were definitely there have been criticisms of Latouche's libretto, at least one calling it timeless, not in a good way, but it didn't have time, it didn't have meter. It's baked into it. There's a lot of very intentional stuff. But this opening bit is all in these 7-beat phrases. which I think is kind of fun. This all goes on for a bit, and then eventually the opera house door opens, and out steps a couple of men in tails. They've clearly been in the opera house, and one of them is Horace Tabor, who we've been hearing about a good bit in the Old Miner's Song. He's very excited that Tabor wants to buy his mine. The saloon girls inform us that Tabor owns the whole damn town. He owns the grocery store, he owns the bank, he owns the opera house, he owns everything. And then the man himself walks on stage. And it's usually pretty obvious. They typically stage it where he's coming out with a group of men they call his cronies throughout the course of the opera. He and Augusta both have a set of cronies. It's good fun. There's a silly thing in this libretto where every version besides this, you get one of his cronies saying to Bushy, Barney, Samuel, and me. But in this, for whatever reason, it's to Bushy, Barney, Ernie, Bill, and me. So we've got a whole bunch of extra cronies. Me being, he's named actually here as Jacob. Yeah, Sam, Bushy, Barney, and Bill are the cronies and associates of Tabor. But then we get Bushy, Barney, Ernie, Bill, and me. So I don't know where Ernie comes from in this. Ernie doesn't exist. Justice for Ernie. He's not real. He's a figment of this libretto, this copy of the libretto's imagination. But Tabor comes out with his cronies, and they're all smoking cigars, and they're kind of chatting, and they start riffing. They start kind of giving each other a hard time, you know. Tabor's talking about the opera house. He says, "Look at this place. I built this place. It's a bang up job, if I say so. I shouldn't. You know, I'm gonna be a little modest here, but smart as any opera house you're likely to see. Chandeliers aglitter, real imported velvet, brass and mahogany, tapestries from Europe. Yes, sir, it's a fitting place for art and culture." We could stand some culture here in Colorado, and that is still true. Anyway, Bang Up Job is my favorite aria in the entire thing. I love Bang Up Job. I have a tattoo from Bang Up Job. I don't know how visible that's going to be, but I have a tattoo from Bang Up Job. It's really good fun. This is where we get some exposition about Horace Tabor from the man himself, right? The cronies and Tabor are giving each other a little bit of a hard time. Tabor's talking about the opera house. His cronies are saying, you know, who'd have ever thought of it but Horace Tabor. And Tabor says, yeah, you know, and you guys came up with me, right? We were mining together. Everything looks beautiful tonight except for you pack rats. Dress you up in swallowtails, clap a top hat on you. You still look like you just stepped out of a mine shaft. And then they kind of rib him a little bit. You're no sweet-smelling daisy yourself. And they go back and forth for a bit, and it kind of becomes this, like, you know, but who, they might call you lieutenant governor, but you're just a panhandling man just like us, you know. And so there's a little bit of this going on. On the note of meter, Tabor, everything Tabor's doing early on is actually 12 beats rather than 7. So there's sort of this implication, like this is the hero of our story, right? He gets more beats, he's more important. Devastatingly, at the end of the opera, when things go poorly for him, spoilers, he trickles down to just 2-beat phrases as he's kind of losing all hope and dying. And so it's these really beautiful, subtle things that Latouche's putting in this libretto. Man, anytime I read criticism of this libretto, I just want to be like, you don't get it, man. There's so many good things going on. I'll get into a few of them. It's so thoughtful. It's so beautifully constructed, and then historically accurate to a pretty large degree as well. Certainly there's things that are invented, there's meetings that never happened, and there's some cute little contrivances for the sake of meter, and we'll talk about a few of those as we go, but this libretto is really good. It's really good, you guys. This is one of those operas that the more time you spend with it, the better it gets. I think seeing it once or hearing it once, you might walk out going, yeah, that was pretty good. You might even cry at the end, but the more time you spend with it, it really just starts to come alive. I think that's part of why I like it so much is I sat down to record this and I was like, I can't start recording. There's so much about this opera I don't know. And my roommate was like, shut up, record, shut up. You need to record. Just do it. And so here we are. But there's just so much. I've only just started digging into some of the more musical elements of both the libretto and the score. I don't have enough music theory to tell you why the music is so good. I can give you little bits and pieces. I'll interview somebody who can tell you why someday. That'll be really fun. Charles Cornell, if you're watching this, you should do some videos on the Ballad of Baby Doe. I'll throw it in your YouTube comments. Thanks for doing Hunchback of Notre Dame, by the way. That's my other favorite thing, so. Anyway, the crony, they're giving each other a hard time, and then it turns into, yeah, who would have ever thought of any of this but Horace Tabor? Horace is so cool. Tell us your story, Horace, is basically how this sort of goes. And then we get Horace's story from the horse's mouth. And Bang Up Job, it's so fun. It's so fun because it's Horace myth making. He's telling us how he got here, and he's doing it in a very bold way. You know, I came this way from Massachusetts through the Kansas territory, pick and shovel in my hand, belly full of gin and glory. And it's so folky, and you get this chorus in between all the things. Dig, dig you gophers, dig them holes, dig away to save your souls. John Latouche was a folkie, actually. He was really into English folk, and you can tell it's here, it's baked into this. You get some really great verses in this where, you know, Tabor's talking about his wife. A fine gal is my wife Augusta, never hope to meet a finer. Ties me to her apron strings, case I dig my way to China. You get this sort of boys banter going on in here. And then you get these other elements that are just so good. You get the farmer's cursed wife idea comes in a bit. You know, the farmer sells his wife to the devil at some point, and she gives all the demons in hell such a hard time that he sends her back. You get some of that. I took the devil for a partner, but my wife, she was so spiteful. Satan said, I'm going home. Life in hell is more delightful, right? Like, it's so good. There's a British folk band called Bellowhead that does a farmer's cursed wife sort of thing to the tune of Lily Bolero. And one of their verses is, I've been a devil all of my life, but I never knew hell till I met your wife. So it's just, it's taken right out of English folklore and American folklore. And it's just it's fun. It's a dance number. It's a hoedown. They stage this and they dance it well. It's really fun to watch. You get all this backstory for Tabor, his relationships with some of the people in the saloon. The saloon girls come out and are dancing with him, and the various miners in the bar are hanging out, and everyone's having a great time. Then we get Augusta. Augusta steps in. Now, Augusta's first introduction to us is all through Tabor's perspective initially, right? So he is talking to the boys earlier about the opera house. You know, you can give the credit to my wife, Augusta. She kept on whining that this town should have some culture, right? He's kind of playing up sort of some marital discord or the old ball and chain for his friends early on. And then in A Bang Up Job in the song, we get a bunch of this as well. We don't get to see Augusta for her own merit yet. It's all Tabor's perspective in the context of kind of saying stuff and sort of performing this masculinity, I think, that he feels that he needs to perform when he's around his buddies. And then Augusta comes in, and of course she's furious, right? The men are all out here dancing with saloon girls. They're supposed to be in the opera box, and the first thing we hear her say is, Horace, what is this? Have you taken leave of your senses? For just one evening, can't you act with a bit of dignity? So we have this picture of Augusta in our minds, right? That she's this sort of nagging harpy of a wife. And then she steps onto the stage and cements that immediately, right? We are convinced that Tabor is right, that all these things that he's saying about his wife, she must just be terrible. And ooh, yeah, she kind of is. And so she scolds him for a little bit. The ladies and I worked hard to secure artists of the highest caliber for this concert, and you men step out in the sight of all, making us look silly there, sitting in the box alone. All the more ridiculous when we find you here, cavorting with these harridans, dancing with these Jezebels. So she's immediately throwing out these, like, looking at these women and going, what are you doing? What are you doing with these low-class women? Why are you here right now? You're supposed to be in there with us. And Tabor takes the tongue lashing, right? And he says, now, Augusta, wait a bit. We just stepped out for a cigar while the string quartet was on. Lecture us, but why on earth snub the girls and call them names? And we get some really interesting Tabor characterization here, right? Because this could have been written in a number of ways. He could have just kind of, yeah, yes, my dear, yes, okay, yes. Yes, anything you say, you're right, you know. Or he could have argued with her. He could have stood up for himself. But he doesn't. He stands up for the girls. And he goes on to say, they work for me and you owe them some respect. Dollars from this old saloon, same as dollars from the mine, helped to build this handsome opera house, helped to put this shindig on. These painted Jezebels doing high kicks for the boys helped to put this concert on, much as your committee did. He doesn't defend himself. He knows that she's kind of right to be angry with him. But he doesn't care for the injustice of calling out these women and bringing them into it when it's really, they're not a part of it. That's not really fair. And I think it's a really interesting thing because I think Horace has slept with a few of these girls. There's a little bit of that going on because we find out later in the opera that, of course, Baby Doe is not the first time that he has strayed. So I think there's some of that possibly going on here. I mean, he clearly knows them. They're all familiar and on good terms. But also, I think there's a sort of class thing happening here because Tabor doesn't come from money. He comes from a relatively poor family. He strikes out to become a stonecutter, and That's how he meets Augusta. He's working for her father, and they meet and court and fall in love. She's a bit more middle class than he is. I don't think there's a huge class divide between the two of them. But he doesn't come from much, and he spends 30 years in the wilderness between farming in Kansas and trying to make a living there, and then heading out to Colorado to these various mining camps and trying to make a fortune. He and Augusta spend a lot of time chasing these gold rushes and building general stores and post offices in all these towns as they're going. And so he spent much more time being a miner than he ever has as a rich man. This is a very new development. And by all accounts, historically, Horace Tabor didn't seem to change much when it came to him becoming wealthy. There was a quote from him where he said, I like people and they like me. He was always pretty gregarious, and he was always pretty down to earth and pretty easy. And so I think this is in kind of a subtle way meant to allude to that. I think we're building up a little bit of the tension between him and Augusta. There's a lot of tension between him and Augusta on a variety of different levels, but this is just sort of one crack in that, she's trying to build something of them in a society way. She says, really, Horace, you're too much. Remember who you are. That's her response to all this stuff about the girls working for him and the dollars from the saloon bringing in Adelina Patty, right? It's that sort of difference in opinion on how they should behave. Again, it's an interesting inclusion. It's not what you expect. And that's one of the fun things about this opera as well, is you get the three leads are all introduced in this first act, and we're about to get to Baby Doe. Augusta's cronies, of course, have come out with her and are glaring at their husbands. And they say, intermission's over now, let's go in. And then we get this delightful little, the men saying, yes, my dear, you're right, you're always right. It's played for a bit of a laugh, and it's always lovely. And then as they're all going into the opera, we get this sweet little waltz, this just sweet little waltz, and Baby Doe comes onto the scene. We get our Baby Doe. And Baby Doe's entrance, there's a lot to be said about this. So she comes into her sweet little waltz, and she says, I beg your pardon, can you direct me to the Clarendon Hotel? And the way this is staged, Clarendon Hotel is next door to the Tabor Opera House, right? It's a big sign that says Clarendon right there. And so this is very much she's trying to get Tabor's attention. I beg your pardon, look, I'm so lost, I just arrived from Central City and I don't know my way around, and gosh, mister, could you help me, She knows who Horace Tabor is. At this stage of the game, Horace Tabor is one of the wealthiest men in the country. He is already famous everywhere, and especially in Colorado. If she's just coming from Central City, it's not that far. She's coming from another mining camp. She knows who Horace Tabor is. So I've always read this as she puts herself in his path. She comes in, she sees him, she knows who he is, and she says, I beg your pardon, could you help me? And she contrives an excuse for them to meet. John Latouche absolutely intended that. There were some changes in the libretto early on where Latouche put in several things where Baby Doe is a bit more intentional in her seduction here. She knows who he is, and she's here for this. So he says, if I can be of any help, I hope you'll let me know. She says, you're very kind, and Augusta cuts in saying, Horace, we're waiting. What are you doing? Get in here. And so he says, I hope we'll meet again, and goes into the opera house. And Baby Doe, to kind of herself into the audience, says, I'm sure we'll meet again, Horace Tabor. Indeed, we'll meet again. She's planning on meeting him again, right? If she wasn't planning on seducing him before she came to Leadville, this is the moment. She is absolutely going to be seducing that man. This is her intent. She is after him for his money. There's no bones about that. Douglas Moore even called her a little gold digger in the beginning of the opera. She is here for Horace Tabor's money. And that's, I think, one of the delightful things about this opera is that changes, right? And so that kind of brings me back to this idea of the introduction of these three characters, right? So we have our three leads. This is an opera about a love triangle, right? The opera introduces the three of them as their respective tropes, these sort of things that the audience can latch on to and understand right away. So firstly, we get Horace Tabor, big bombastic guy. He's probably this philandering jerk. Clearly he's flirting with all these saloon girls. He's wealthy. You kind of get this picture of Horace. Augusta comes in as sort of his nagging harpy of a wife, right? We get Baby Doe coming in as this, this home-wrecking little slut, right? Like that's sort of the idea. And so the opera introduces the three leads as their various tropes. And then it immediately turns those on their head. These expectations get thwarted almost immediately, and it's so good. It's so good. One of the beautiful things about this opera is you've got a love triangle with no villain. You sort of know how it's going to play out in terms of who's going to choose who and all of that, but all three of these characters are really beautifully written. They're really beautifully fleshed out. They're all just people. They're all well-meaning and flawed. It's really stunning to watch the way that they develop. And so that kind of brings us to the end of Act 1, Scene 1. We'll start getting some development of these characters very, very quickly. Scene 2 kind of takes off. So yeah, that's Act 1, Scene 1 of The Ballad of Baby Doe. We get our leads introduced, we get a sense of time and place. I think that's probably as good a place as any to stop for the moment. I do want to give a shout out to Central City Opera. I feel so fortunate that I get to go do this. I emailed the box office back in, November or so, December maybe, and I said, hey, I wonder, could I get a subscription package if I bought a ticket to all 9 performances of Baby Doe? Here's a picture of my tattoo, my nerd cred. I realize this is an insane ask and it's okay if not. And they got back to me right away and they said, that's amazing. Yes, absolutely, give us a call. And then I waited until probably February to call them because I was kind of embarrassed because this is a very silly thing to do. They were so nice. They were just so enthusiastic and so kind, and they gave me a group rate, and so I could afford to do this very silly thing, and my work schedule was flexible enough that I was able to send an email to my boss last year and say, look, I'm gonna be gone these days. I'm going to Central City and I'm doing this insane thing. So, thank you, Central City, particularly the folks in the box office, for just being really nice. Really nice to me.
I only have so much.
Smash cut.
I only have so much storage. So
we ran out of storage. Anyway, I've rambled long enough at this point. There will be more of this and more scenes to cover. So thanks so much if you've made it this far. Thank you. I appreciate it. My friends and family are tired of hearing about this opera, so I'm making it your problem now. You can hear my roommates giggling in the background. Bless them. Yeah, we'll see you in the next one. Hi. Hello. Will you record with me? That's gonna be a continuity error.
Well, you could just add that bit in.